All right, hey everybody, I'm Justin Bogard, the host of the Be the Bank virtual note meetup for the month of June. This is June 2020. Yay, we made it this far, made it through quarantine. Woo. All right. So this is me. I'm your host. There's my information, Justin at Bright Path Notes if you need to get a hold of me. And so our company, Bright Path Notes, is the one of the sponsors, and the reason why we put this together is because we want to share information about, well, the real estate notes, because that's what we love to do, and want to realize there's not a lot of people that know a lot about notes, how to buy them, sell them, create them, do partials and other advanced techniques like that. And so this meetup gives us little tidbits of information about any and all subjects related to notes. Today we'll have a specific agenda, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but let's do some house cleaning stuff for the moment. So big disclaimer, I'm sure you're not all surprised. I am not an attorney, I'm not a tax consultant, and I am not a financial advisor. I am a note investor, baby. So we have sponsors for our meetup, guys. I'm big time here. Look, we got Bright Path Notes. We supply the deal flow to make your cash flow is our slogan. So reach me. There's my direct access to my phone number. I'll quickly move the screen along so you don't have to write that down. Justin at Bright Path Notes, you can get hold of me there. We also have our CyREA members. This is our local REA club, Larry, Marishka, and Richard. And Vicki Perry is our executive director. She's awesome. There's her phone number, her email. If anyone is interested in the Indianapolis area, or even outside of Indianapolis, you want to be a part of our REA club. We have over 800 members currently right now. It's the Central Indiana Real Estate Investor Association. And that's how you get a hold. So they sponsor our meetup, and their members as well are allowed to come to our meetup, and they get access to this as well. Typically, guys, when we do have a live meetup, we are at Launch Fishers, which is a place just on the northeast corner of the Indianapolis area. And it is a shared workspace. I don't know if any of you have worked at a shared workspace, but I, for one, love it. They have a gigabit network up and down. They supply plenty of space for you to work. They have private phone rooms. They have private meeting rooms. They have larger meeting rooms. And they have a theater room, which is actually where we usually have our meetup when it's live. And next month we should be there. Yay, back to normal. So that'll be awesome. So anyways, Libby Hales is the person that you would connect with if you're interested in utilizing a shared workspace. I believe I pay $1,000 for the year, and that is for me to utilize their facilities except for the private suites. So it's pretty awesome. Less than $100 a month. You really can't go wrong with that. I have investors and clients that come there, and other people that I partner with. It's very nice setup. It's better than bringing them to my master bedroom, right? That'd be kind of weird, right? So for those of you part of CyREA, here is your PHP credit link. It is http://bit.ly/CyREA notes. Put that in the URL. I believe you put in your first name, last name, and email address, and it gives you PHP credits. Somebody at one time told me what that means, and I always forget. So don't ask me what it means, because I honestly forget. But it's some sort of legacy credit that you can continue to build on to show your mastery of different real estate skills and keeping up with your continuing education of real estate. What do you think about that, guys?
Cool.
I knew that once upon a time as well, but I have plumb forgotten.
Ooh. Hey, we looks like we got somebody from Ottawa, Ontario.
Oh, wow.
In Canada.
PHP stands for pretty hot property.
Pretty hot.
I think
pretty
that must
hot
be
profit.
it.
Pretty hot profit.
Pretty hot profit.
Pretty high profit.
Pretty high profits. We're getting better.
Yeah. Yep. So let's get into the what I am most proud of last year and this year is the podcast, guys. I know you guys are major subscribers to the podcast. I hope so. The Two Wealth Show is a podcast that my friend Super E and I put together. She is a short-term rental type of investor, and I am obviously a note investor. We kind of combine topics and conversations. We interview people, and Larry, Marishka, and Richard, you guys would know Joe Varndor. He was actually an interview we did on one of our last episodes, episode 9, and that was pretty awesome to have him on there. So we are on Stitcher, TuneIn, Google Podcasts, YouTube. We actually record this thing via video. We post it on the Bright Path Notes YouTube channel. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio. There's like 35 more of these podcast directories. I can't name them all, but we're on them. It's called The Two Wealth Show. Go ahead and subscribe to it if you want some more information about what it is we do in real estate in general, and specifically notes and short-term rentals.
Cool.
Well, let's get into today's agenda. So that was very long-winded getting to this point, guys. So obviously this is our June 10th Note Meetup. And we got Richard, Marishka, and Larry as our guest panelists today. We're going to go over the Note Basics after that. It's what I like to call the Note Basics. Basically, it's showing someone that's never been in the real estate note space before or know what we're talking about, kind of give them the footprint as to what the heck we're talking about, what we're doing. Larry and Marishka are going to be talking about using creative financing. They got a case study for us. And then our dude there at the bottom, or on my screen at the bottom, Richard Thornton, is going to be having structuring a deal. It's called architecting a deal is how I would describe it. So he's got a case study for us as well. I think Larry and Marishka, we got 2 case studies on you and one really awesome one as well from Richard. That's kind of going to be pretty deep in the weeds, but it's going to be really cool what happened and how we did this. So
Awesome.
without further ado, I know Larry and Marishka and Richard, you haven't seen this slide yet because this is my fun slide.
Okay.
I intentionally left this out because that's the type of guy I am.
Mm.
Not to be trusted. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
Marishka, we're gonna start with you.
Oh,
I've got
great.
some party
Why
wear
not?
that's rather embarrassing. So
It could be rather embarrassing. I hope you're
Yeah.
Hey,
ready.
Larry, this is why I tell you, you can't take certain photos of me.
ooh,
So Marishka,
The
you
queen.
live out in Washington. And
I do.
Your beautiful husband is on the call as well, Larry.
Yes.
And so I didn't have a lot of room to put your whole bio on there, but I wanted you to get an opportunity to explain this picture. And then number 2, give our viewers and listeners a little background on Marishka.
Okay.
If you want, you don't have to. You can pass.
Well, I don't know. I've never really required that you call me Queen Marishka, but in fact, that is my title. And
I thought it was gonna be princess. I don't know. I saw
It's
the
an
tiara. I just thought
Egyptian
a
term,
princess.
no, this was actually Larry and I love to we love to travel for fun, but we also love to continue our education. And so this just happened to be an event that we were at related to money and finance and investing and what have you. And it was just kind of a fun exercise that we did where we were doing some role playing, and so hence the tiara there.
That's awesome.
So
That's awesome.
I can expand on that.
Okay.
My theory on that is like why have a princess? Why marry a princess when you can have a queen fighting by your side?
The princess that
Ooh.
needs to be rescued. Yes.
Yeah, right.
Nice. Nice. Well, apparently I
So,
have.
but yeah, so as far as who I am, I'm just a little gal from Puyallup, Washington. I've been around the real estate business, I guess, since I was a child, but wasn't really an active participant in it. My dad was a builder. And I did some mortgages back in the late 90s. I originated some mortgages, worked that stint for a while and then just got out of it and went into healthcare administration. So just took a long break. But Larry and I started investing really when, I guess in a way, when we first got married, when we bought our first house, 9 years after we bought it, it was our primary residence, and then we turned it into a rental, and we still own that property. So,
Nice.
but we got started with notes probably back in 2010. And we kind of, took some twists and turns and did some different things for a while, and then kind of got back into it again a few years ago. And that's really been our primary focus, for the last few years. But, we've done some private lending. We've done a lot of lease options. We've had, a few rentals along the way. I can proudly say I've never done a fix and flip. So if you have any questions about that, I'm not your gal.
Cool. All right, Marishka. Well, thanks for digging into the past with us and explaining the photo. And so next we have up Mr. Larry Gill. Larry, again, I found an interesting photo of you. So I don't know if you're prepared for this, but let's click on the screen here. Come on, buddy. There we go. Larry Gill.
Oh gosh.
Dinner.
I want to know where the
Looks
store
like dinner
is
to
at.
me.
That was a happy day.
So Marishka mentioned we travel a lot, and basically that was in Dallas.
Okay.
and we were some killing time in Dallas. And I decided, everything is bigger in Texas, and that's got your Skittles and your Swedish Fish. That was pretty cool, pretty darn cool. But
I'd forgotten about that.
yeah.
Of course you did, because it's out there on the internet.
But just to expand on Marishka or what she was saying, because she did leave me a few things to say. One thing I really like about the note business is basically we can do our deals from anywhere, and we have bought and sold notes while we're in Hawaii. We have several weeks that we spend in Kauai every year, and that's our favorite place in the world to go, really. And it's the business that we do. It gives us a lot of freedom, and we love it. And oh, and by the way, so just to be clear, Marishka and I are married, but just not to each other.
Oh, very good. Very good.
Uh-oh, Justin isn't sure what to say. Think about that one.
Hey, we can turn into Dr. Phil if we want here. All right. Who's next on the list? I think it's Richard. Richard, I found an interesting photo. Actually, Richard, I think I found your doppelganger. This person kind of looks like you, so I don't know if this is you. You have to tell me if this is you or not.
All right. Oh, that's me many years ago.
you.
You're right.
I found a younger Richard.
Yeah, I haven't had a mustache for 15 years, so that's
15 years.
I don't think I've ever seen you in a tie either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what
I was back in my mortgage banking days. So.
Well, you had to wear a tie, right?
That's right. I wore a tie. Another guy and I were talking about it at one point. I had 15 suits because you had to wear a suit to work every day, right?
15 suits.
Wow.
Goodness.
So we started, I've been in real estate for a little over 30 years, and I started a mortgage banking company, a boutique mortgage banking company with another fellow. We were national lenders. We lent on large apartment complexes and that type of stuff. We sold the company, minimum loan size was $10 million. We sold the company with about an $8 billion portfolio in 2000. And then I invested in a lot of senior housing stuff after that, and did 18 flips, and then made hard money loans, and then got into notes. And have, as Larry was saying, I really enjoy the freedom. I got tired of managing 70 people, which is what we were doing at the mortgage banking company. So,
oh wow,
here I am.
That's not a small building.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks guys for sharing that background for us. Hope that wasn't too much fun there.
Yeah.
But anyways, the next thing I want to talk about is the note basics. So you guys are familiar with probably these slides because I've shown you them before. But this is what we're talking about with real estate notes. So you have a buyer and a seller, usually when you have a house for sale, right? And so they go to a closing, and the seller is going to convey that deed over to the buyer, the person that's paying for the house, right? And so at that closing, usually, more than likely, the buyer is going to have to put down a down payment, and they're going to have to figure out how to get the rest of the money to buy this house. And they usually go to a bank, like a Bank of America or a Chase or a big name bank like that, and they get what's called a note and mortgage from there. They sign a promissory note and mortgage, and then they owe the bank the rest of the money on a schedule, right? A term schedule of such and such payment over how many months there. And so the bank actually owns the note because it's secured by that real property. That's what we're talking about. So the bank doesn't own the house, they actually own the debt on the house, right? And the buyer is on the actual deed. A little different than having a car. When you buy a car from a dealership, the dealership stays on the deed until you pay off that car, right? Then all of a sudden it becomes yours and you are on the deed or the title of that car. So fast forward to how note investing works. So we realized how the note is created, a mortgage note. That deeded owner still has the deed to the house, and they still owe the bank, and the bank holds that paper, right? So Mr. or Mrs. Investor, or it could be an LLC or an entity or a retirement account or just an individual if you really wanted to. If you have some sort of cash, then you can pay for that note. And the price for that note depends on the negotiation of the bank and investor in this example here. So that's the most important part of this. Us as investors, is we just purchase that paper, see how nothing changes hands with the deed. So the borrower or the homeowner now doesn't really know anything different other than, hey, instead of paying Bank of America, I'm going to be paying Bright Path Notes or Richard Thornton or Larry Gill or Marishka Pilch. And so that is the only thing different. So the payments don't go to the bank, they go to whoever bought that paper. And everything is conveyed through an assignment and a launch. So that's our note basics, and that's what I like to kind of run through first. So if you have any questions about anything, obviously use the Q&A and the chat box as well, and I'll be kind of fielding those calls. So the first thing we have up is seller financing to the rescue. So Larry and Marishka, I will go ahead and advance through some slides here, but I'll kind of let you guys take over this part of the presentation for you. So take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Justin.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, so Justin was just talking about, buying notes that were created from a bank or an institution, but there's another facet of note investing, and that is buying and or creating seller finance notes. And seller finance notes are basically when the seller of the property takes substitutes for the position of the bank. They basically extend credit and get their equity paid to them over time. And, seller financing has been around forever, but it rises and falls in popularity based really on the credit markets. So in the early 2000s, when you could literally get a loan by fogging a mirror, that was about the only requirement.
Yeah.
There was no need really for seller financing. And after the housing crisis of 2008, we started seeing a big increase in seller financing because the banks started to really constrict their credit and compress it, and they weren't giving loans out as readily. So if people want to sell a house, and the buyers can't get bank financing, the alternative is to offer seller financing or some sort of private financing. So seller financing really fills the void left by the institutional banking industry. So I just kind of wanted to, give you a little history on that. You still want to verify those things that the bank would. I mean, you still want to look at the borrower and say, hey, do they have decent credit? What's their likelihood that they're going to repay me? Do they have a down payment? Do they have skin in the game? Do they actually have income and an ability to repay? Those things are really important when you're either creating seller financing or if you're buying a seller finance note. The credit squeeze is real. And we have an example coming up a little bit later of a deal that I just put together as a realtor. So I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But the credit squeeze is real, and people are getting left behind right now. A lot of
Marishka,
people.
while you're on that, I'd like to see, is there anybody that's basically been in a situation where maybe if they're a realtor or something like that, they had a deal that was basically in the process and then it fell through. Has anybody been in that category in the last few months?
Yeah, where it was in escrow and it fell out due to financing? Yes, no?
I bet there has been.
I'll bet there has been too, because I've actually had a few phone calls recently, just last night, in fact, had another one from realtors contacting me and saying, hey, I need to know a little bit more about how this works. I understand buying and selling houses, but I don't know the first thing about finance. So we've got somebody who says, I'm a loan officer. I see it all the time. Yeah. I mean, you don't finance everybody who comes and fills out an application. So the credit squeeze is real, and good borrowers, are getting left behind. It's always been challenging for people who are self-employed. And I'd argue that self-employed people oftentimes are, probably going to be some of the best borrowers because they know how to budget just to run their business, perhaps more so than a W-2 employee might. But it's hard for them to get financing. And again, if buyers can't buy, sellers can't sell. So if you're offering seller financing or some sort of private financing where an investor comes in and basically becomes the creditor, you want to create terms that work for all parties. And this can provide long-term cash flow. And if you put all those pieces together, you actually have a saleable note. So you're collecting cash flow, but you could also sell your note and get cashed out of it or get cashed out of a part of it. So It's a lot of fun
And
things.
that
to do
last
with
part there too is very important. You know, it's like, just because you think you're going to sell your house with seller financing doesn't mean that it's going to be the best choice for you. But we've seen these things back and forth and up and down, where, gosh, if they just talk to a note pro and
Yeah.
talk to somebody that has been around the block a few times, and before they tried to sell their property with seller financing, they would have been in such a better position.
Yeah, just because they just missed a few key things like, getting a credit and background check and income statements, from the borrower, or verifying that, we're going to mention that, if we pay off this house, that'll go to pay off the note, but they forgot to cross collateralize it or something. So, I mean, it might be a perfectly legal document, but some parts of it are going to make the note not as valuable just because they didn't really know how to structure it.
Yeah. Absolutely. You guys hit the nail on the head there.
So let's move along then. So this was actually, it was a property that we owned.
Okay.
And we had this, we actually bought this property with kind of a hybrid, if you will. We basically did kind of a subject to on it. And then we lease optioned it for a period of time. We had a few different folks come in and they would lease it with an option to buy. And for various reasons, they didn't buy. It wasn't because they didn't want to, or even because they couldn't, but just sometimes life happened.
Right.
We had a young man who actually lived in this house, and he put in landscaping in the front yard because he was going to landscaping school. How cool was that?
Yeah. Yeah. Very nice for you,
Right?
right? Yeah. See the value going up every minute.
But at some point we decided that we wanted to sell it, and we were thinking about selling it with seller financing. We had a buyer who we thought was lined up that ended up kind of falling through because his house didn't sell the way he was planning it to. So his situation changed, and we were getting ready to leave for Hawaii. So we didn't want this house just sitting around vacant. So we ended up getting some other folks in there who lease optioned it. And when I looked at their situation, I said, gosh, you guys, you could probably buy this house pretty quickly. And they said, oh, really? I didn't think we were old enough. They were like 24. I said,
so for those folks that maybe don't know, a lease option, for the way that we do them, is basically it's a lease with an option to buy, but not an obligation. So that's the way we do it.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different flavors: rent to own, lease purchase, what have you. But yeah, we usually do a lease with option to buy. Anyway. They were tenants of ours for about 8 months with this lease option, and she just needed to pay off a few bills. She had great credit; it was in the high 700s, and they both had good jobs. He had no credit at all, but again, they took care of the house. They were making their monthly payments, and then she was able to get a mortgage. And this house we wanted to get $230,000 for. Well, she only qualified for $195,000. And so what we were able to do is create a second mortgage. So we got our $195,000 and we were able to pay off the underlying loan and get some cash. And then we created a second position note. And now we have monthly cash flow going on for a long period of time. So so here's kind of the stats. They started out as lease option tenants. They eventually purchased with bank financing. We carried back a second lien and created monthly cash flow. And the way we structured this particular deal is we wanted to make sure that their first position note with the bank and our second position note with us was less, along with taxes and insurance, was less than their monthly rent payment. So it really was a win-win. And so even though we charged a decently high rate on the second, we amortized it over 30 years. We put a 10-year balloon on it, and we told them, look, as soon as you can qualify to refinance this, go ahead and do this, because you're going to get a much better interest rate. We gave them 10%. They could turn around and refinance this, at the rate term after it gets seasoned for a little while, and probably get it down to 4, So we told them, go ahead and do that. But in the meantime, we're getting a monthly payment of $360 some odd dollars, the note that we originated was just shy of 40,000, but if it pays off at 10 years, at the 10-year balloon, we're still going to get a big payoff of $36,806.
Sweet.
That's not too shabby.
Right.
You know, but again, it's a win-win, right? Because they really wanted to have a home of their own. They wanted to buy it. We were able to craft something just to make it a win-win situation.
This is why I call this a creative finance deal, because I mean, exactly. Somebody that wanted to live there and stay there, they could only get 85% of the loan versus the full asking price you were wanting. So you carried a second mortgage to basically bridge that gap in there.
Yeah.
And so you benefit from getting 85% in cash at closing, right?
Right.
And then you get to hold back 15% of what you could have got in value and just get cash flow on it. And guess what? In 10 years, you almost get that principal back, you know,
Almost
as if
the
it
whole
was that
thing.
day. So it's almost like you were getting interest for 120 payments and barely any principal went down. So this is the beauty of the amortization schedule.
Yeah. I mean, most of us, when we buy a house, you know, when we sign all the paperwork and we, you know, maybe some of us don't even want to look at that, that statement that shows, you know, how much interest we're going to pay over the life of the loan, because it's usually a really scary number.
Yeah.
But if you can flip that and, you know, it's like, oh, instead of now paying interest, what if I could receive interest?
Absolutely.
I mean, that can make for a very nice situation and solve somebody's problem at the same time.
Well, and on their side too, absolutely. You know, they actually were just looking for a rental when they first came, and we actually kind of, well, we did take too much coaxing once we kind of showed them the numbers and talked to them about how it could work. And it actually, it's kind of funny because she said, well, geez, I don't know if I can buy a house. Am I old enough? You know, it's like, well,
yeah.
Geez, you're old enough. And,
Oh, they're so cute.
And
so
it's that's one thing I really like about this business too, is basically if we can create something that's going to be a win for everybody, you know, that's just terrific. And you know, it's kind of exciting. We found out just a few weeks ago that their twin babies are born, you know, and so they've got twins in the house, you know, you know, and you know, it's just, you know, when you can help people, it makes it all fun, even all the more fun.
Exactly.
Well, hey, we got a question that popped up. Yeah. Do you want me to read it off?
Yeah, go ahead.
So my buddy Jim here asked a real good question. He says, what are the challenges of getting an institutional lender to refinance out of that second lien? Would you offer them a low interest loan on a second?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so what I would probably recommend to them, and we actually talked about this with their loan officer, is if they just got a new the loan would need to season for a while, right? So they need to make payments for at least a year. And then as long as the value is there, they could do a rate term refinance and bundle the first and second mortgage loan together. So it would be a new first.
Right.
So taking cash out might result in something a little different, but if they were just to refinance the first and second and combine them together, you know, then that's where you know, can take out that second. Cause they're, you know, depending on the market, it might be tough to just refinance a second position loan and the rate's going to be higher. Almost always the rate's going to be higher. But if you can refinance it and put it into a new first, then you can benefit from lower interest rates. Good question.
And you have confidence as well when you know the borrower's credit was already over 700 anyway.
Yeah,
you know, it's just going to get
already
stronger
had
with
very
the first
good credit.
and second mortgage tracking it with the servicing company. So that's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. And this was the beautiful thing too, is they asked, this just did a lot for my confidence, even though I already thought they were great folks. He said, could I have this loan report to the credit bureaus so that, you know, I can continue to help improve my credit? And I was like, well, gosh, you know, so I had to look around and find a servicing company that would actually report to the credit bureaus, because they don't all do that with private finance. But I did find one. And so, you know, so he's been, you know, building his credit at the same time as making those payments and getting equity in the house.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Very cool.
Yep. If anyone has any questions about this one, we're going to jump into the next case study for Larry and Marishka, and then we'll kind of we can ask questions about any one of these two. So we'll jump to the next one. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, so this one is this is a really simple deal. I actually happen to be a realtor, and you know, I mentioned Larry and I do a lot of lease options, and so this property owner actually reached out to me. It was a referral. They were thinking of perhaps, you know, how could they structure a lease option? They'd kind of heard about it. They thought maybe that would make sense because they knew the buyer who wanted to buy this house. And I'll go into a little more of that story here in a second. But
this just happened within the last few weeks, and
Oh.
basically super short turnaround as far as how we put this deal together.
Yeah,
awesome.
we were able to close this deal in about 8 days.
Oh, wow.
You know, so really, really fast. I mean, they gave me kind of a short window, and I was like, okay, give me at least 10 days. And we were actually able to get it done in 10,
Wow.
but I mean, in 8, but anyway, so they came to us thinking that they might want to do a lease option. I was totally fine with that. But in talking with them a little bit more and explaining various options to them, they came to the conclusion that maybe seller financing would make more sense for them.
Okay.
So basically the story is this. The lady who owned the house was 93 years old. And while she was still able to, you know, take care of herself and everything, she was thinking, you know, I want to move into, you know, some type of a independent living condo situation. So, you know, and those cost some money, what have you. And so she wanted to do that. And there was an opening at this place that she wanted to go. And so she wanted to be able to kind of jump on it. They had thought about selling the house last fall. And, you know, so they'd had, you know, different realtors come out and, you know, they were thinking they'd sell the house for about $300,000. And I said, well, you know, if you do seller financing, you might be able to, you know, get a little bit more for the house because it's an amenity. It's like having granite countertops or hardwood floors or a 4th bedroom. You know, it's desirable. And they said, well, we know somebody. It happened to be somebody who, you know, they knew from their church who had been planning to buy a home. They were planning to buy their first home, and he had a great job in the aerospace industry. And then COVID happened and he was furloughed. So instead of just, you know, sitting around on unemployment, he said, well, I'm going to go out and work. So he got a job at Home Depot, and he, on his pay stubs, you're looking at him and it's like, he was making great money. I mean, he was working a lot of overtime too, for sure. But, you know, with the hazard pay and everything else, he was making really good money. And so, but what happened was they were planning to buy this other house. And at the last minute, the bank said, no, we're not going to fund you because you're no longer working in your industry. Aerospace, Home Depot, for some reason, they didn't like that. But, you know, I knew these were good people and they had great credit. And they were currently living with their 3 children in a friend's basement apartment. So they were feeling really cramped. They really wanted to move out.
But this sounds like an HGTV show.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. I kind of felt like it, except I've never actually met these people in person. I've only met them through Zoom, you know, and on the telephone. It's kind of funny. So anyway, they knew the seller and the seller knew them, and they wanted to work with each other. And so that made my job, you know, pretty easy. It was just a matter of kind of crossing T's and dotting I's and making sure everybody, you know, got what they needed. Yeah. They were able to afford, they said they'd like to keep their monthly payment all in between $1,800 and $2,000 a month. And the seller was like, that'd be great because I've got, you know, investments and what have you. And, you know, with my pension and my Social Security, you know, but I do need a little more income. And what was interesting is they were trying to decide if they should pay off. They had an underlying mortgage of, I think, about $85,000 that was at a 6.5%. And they were thinking, should we take that money out of, you know, they had it in some investment that was, you know, only giving her like 3%. And they were, you know, trying to decide if they should take that money out and, you know, pay off the mortgage. And I said, I can do whatever you want. You know, we can wrap it, or we can, you know, you can pay it off. Just, you know, let me know. I said, but I can't really advise you on what to do in that respect. So they went to their financial advisor. They told him the situation, and he was like, so you're going to pull the money out, pay off your underlying mortgage, and then take back a loan, and you're going to be getting 6% on your money? He goes, yeah, that's a good deal. You should do that. So I was really thrilled that their financial advisor, told them that. I knew that all along, but
Right.
I'm not a financial advisor, so I didn't really feel it was my place to tell them. I could just say, these are the numbers, do what you want.
Right.
So they were, they were real happy. It worked out, and the way we structured the deal, we just did a 30-year term, and the monthly payment with principal and interest was just shy of $1,800, and with taxes, insurance, it was just shy of $2,000. So, quick deal. They, mom was able to move into her independent care facility. They were able to move out of their friend's basement, and we wrapped it up inside of 10 days. So
to be clear, my wife is a saint. She was talking to the daughter like up to, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 times a day, just talking through the deal.
She was a bit high maintenance.
Yeah. Anyway, sweet lady. And my wife really kind of handled that situation very well. And I think that's really what's all of a lot of this comes down to, is just basically, how can we put this deal together? How can we make it work for everybody? And obviously it's like, well, geez, there's sometimes people that they just don't know what they don't know,
Right. Don't know what they don't know. Exactly. Yeah.
So then they wanted 300 for it, but they actually could get 330.
Exactly.
And so they found somebody with 30,000 down cash.
Mm-hmm.
Did the transaction in less than 10 days. And so they got the cash flow they wanted. So you just backed into the deal based on what the seller needed, which was that $1,800 to $2,000 monthly cash flow.
Exactly. Yeah, the seller was like, if I can get $1,500 a month, I'm good. And the buyer said, I can pay $1,800 to $2,000 a month. And I'm like, well, if that's what they can pay, let's do that.
Yeah,
So,
it just worked, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, we talked about all different ways that we could make it more complicated, with doing a first and a second, just to give them all this flexibility. In the long run, they said, let's just keep it simple.
Okay.
So we kept it simple, and I referred them to one of the servicing companies that we work with, that, so that they could get it set up so that they're, going to be basically hands off and not have to deal with things. But, it was, there was a fair amount of work involved in putting it all together, but ultimately it was fairly simple because we all wanted the same thing.
And they probably know who to go to if they ever need to sell that note in the future.
Well, they've already talked about not only that, but they said, we may want to start investing in notes.
Nice.
Yay.
So
Nice.
Yay.
Every day
no
there's one more
prompting
person.
on my part, but
Ding, 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 ding.
they said, gee, this is kind of a good deal. Maybe we should invest in some notes instead of just having it in these other investments at 3%. So
You've won the prize.
yes.
There should be a website like a countdown, but a count up on people that get going into notes, and they realize, oh, I should do notes, and just watch that number just take up.
It really is interesting because, everybody, whatever we don't understand, we tend to, it's like, oh, I don't understand that. I don't think I want to, I don't want to go down that road.
Right.
The confused mind says, no, I don't want to do that. But once you start understanding it, the light bulbs start going off, and you say, oh, wow, I could do this. What if I did this?
Right.
So we've had many situations in the past where we've worked with people on one type of a deal, and, we've mentioned notes to them, and they're like, no. And then, a few months or maybe a year or so later, they come back around to us and they say, about those notes.
How about those notes?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing those couple of case studies. I'll kind of check out the board here and see what kind of questions we have. But this is the time where if you got questions about those two deals or just something about Larry and Marishka mentioned that they start off with lease options typically, and they are able to convert to an option, and the borrower has a chance, or the tenant at the time has a chance to continue on with convert it to a note mortgage or a deed of trust, depending on, I believe you guys are in deed of trust state. Is that right?
Well, actually, Washington State can do either one,
Okay.
but obviously 98% of them are deed of trust.
So Tim just said he doesn't understand this, and you're not alone, Tim. It takes a while.
You're not alone. Many people, first time they hear it, they're like, I don't get it. I'm
Yeah, I always
confused,
liken
confused.
it to it's like poking a bowl of Jello. You know, it kind of wiggles around, and you know there's some substance there, but you kind of don't know how to approach it. So it takes a little while.
Yeah, you gotta
It
see quite a
really
few case
does.
studies.
And I think the more you expose yourself to it, I mean, it's kind of like if you ever are reading a book and you're almost falling asleep, and you're like, you read that paragraph over and over and over again, and then it might suddenly, you know, register. But that's kind of how it is with notes. It's like it's so different, and we're just not accustomed to thinking that way. And so you hear it a few times, and then, you know, you start to understand one aspect of it. And then once you get that, then your mind kind of opens up to other aspects of it. So it is a learning process. It's not always intuitive. And quite frankly, I think the banks intentionally do a really good job of teaching us to be consumers.
Yeah.
They don't really want us to be thinking like financiers or bankers, because they've got a pretty good gig going. We deposit our money. We're really happy getting a really paltry interest. And then they loan it back to us 10 times over at a much higher interest rate. And we have to jump through all kinds of hoops in order to do that, you know. So they've got a good thing going. I don't fault them for it. It's a beautiful business model, but, you know, we can do it too.
Yeah. Isn't that funny how the day that you sign the contract is the first day that you actually see the contract? The note mortgage. It's like a 50-page document usually, or Fannie and Freddie if it was written with Fannie and Freddie.
Exactly.
Like, here you go, just sign it. And the title company's like, here, sign here, sign here, sign here. We all do it. I've done it.
Marishka, I think we need to talk offline about Larry exposing himself to things. We'll just
exposing himself to what?
Things.
Things?
You said no. You just need to expose yourself to notes. So,
well,
we need to talk about this.
Naughty Larry.
There's a.
Yeah, I'm wearing pants. Yeah.
Okay. And a Hawaiian shirt.
Unlike some people on the call. No.
So I was just about to pay Richard and Justin a compliment. I don't know if I'm going to do it. You know, it's like,
just give it to Justin.
So Justin, I'll give you a compliment. You know, one of the things that Marishka and I like to do is we like to hang out with really smart people too, and the four of us are in kind of a mini mastermind together as well too. And so we get together once every 2 weeks and just kind of talk about things and what's going on in the industry and so on. And you know, it's you know, because it really is, it's a never, you know, it's never stagnant industry. It's changing all the time. And there's always new ways to approach things. And you know, that's you know, kudos for Justin for putting on these meetups and doing this podcast and everything else. It's like, well, that's how a lot of people learn, you know, is learning from other people.
Well, and we're always learning, right? And that's why we hang out with these people, is because, you know, we can't know everything. Just like there's, you know, different types of doctors. You know, you wouldn't go see your dermatologist for a heart condition.
Right.
They both have a certain level of expertise and understanding of general medicine, but then they kind of specialize. So we like to hang out with smart people like Justin and Richard, who, you know, their business models are slightly different than ours, and we can all learn from each other. And that's, you know, what we kind of encourage everyone else to do as well. That's how you learn, is you just expose yourself. Sorry, I'm using that word again. Oops. Anyway, you rub shoulders with.
Right. Well, thank you for the kind words, but yeah, this is why you have to have other people to lean on and bend their ear and ask for advice, because you never know what situation they've been in that's similar to what you're going through. When it comes to notes, every deal that I've ever done is unique. Nothing has
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah,
I've never done a deal that was a cookie cutter.
I always think to myself, like, God, I always have to ask somebody something, because there's something unique about this deal that I've never seen before. You know, every time I run across a deal, especially when they're creative finance deals, like what you guys just showed and what Richard's going to show us here in a minute.
Yeah.
It's awesome because it isn't everything isn't in the box. You know, you have to step outside the box and figure out how do you solve this challenge. You know what the problem is, you know what they want. How do you solve it? And so you work backwards. You have the answer, then you kind of work backwards to solve the problem, so to speak. So
Yeah.
that's what I love about it.
So
Well,
years ago.
Oh, go ahead.
So years ago, we had an investor, and I won't name his name, but Marishka will know who I'm talking about. He said, "I hope you guys make a lot of money on this house." And it's like, I should have known right then and there. It's like, oh, this is gonna be a tough one. It was.
We did ultimately solve a few problems and we made some money on it, but yeah, it had some twists and turns.
Well, I know on the chat, we got someone that asked, if we sell our house through a note, do we need to pay taxes for the gain? I believe they're talking about capital gain.
Yeah, that's a good question.
So let's preface, before we give our experience here, let's preface that we are not tax people, we're not tax consultants or anything like that. But I'll kind of let you guys dive into the.
So we encourage you to seek counsel, however,
how we understand it.
How we understand it. So the short answer is yes, but there is an IRS code 453 that deals with installment sales. And when you sell a property with a note, you can defer your capital gains over time rather than having to pay that lump sum. So, you know, whether you're just selling it with financing, you should only be liable for the amount that you recover in each given year. And then there's some other strategies that are more advanced that you know, if you're in a much higher income bracket, not income bracket, but if you're in a much higher capital gains situation, where you're going to be, you know, looking at a capital gains bill in excess of $100,000, there's some special types of trusts that you can use associated with installment sales. But generally speaking, if you're just using a note, then you should be able to defer your capital gains. But again, talk with your accountant, talk with your, you know, CPA, and just find out what's specific for your situation.
Right. That was a very good answer. Very good answer to that. Richard, do you want to have, Larry, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you answered it very well.
Yeah. All right, there you have it. Larry Gill and Marishka Pilch. There's info@evergreensuccess.com. If you guys want to get a hold of them and ask them questions, you're more than welcome to. And don't forget, we have a Facebook group where all four of us are kind of the moderators on that. So I'll give you that information at the end of the presentation today, so you can sign up for our Facebook group, and that way you can just ask questions. Maybe you got a deal going on or something you don't want to wait till the next meetup to get answered. That's what it's there for. So we're on there. We're looking at it to see if anybody has any questions and need any help with that. So Richard, I believe you are next, my friend.
Cool. So
go ahead, Richard.
What we're going to talk a little bit about is structured finance. And I don't want to get too far down in the weeds here, but
I just want to point out that this is your workflow whenever you're analyzing a deal, correct?
That's right. That's right. It is.
This is the back of Richard's head 10 years ago.
That's 10 years ago. That's right. Before gray hair.
In your suit.
In my suit. That's right.
That's suit number 14.
Right. You got it. So what we're trying to do here is a little bit of an extension of what Larry and Marishka were talking about, which is you're trying to make it so people who ordinarily couldn't maybe buy a house can. You can call those people a lot of different things besides Fred and Sally. No, you can call them non-QM, non-qualifying mortgage buyers, or there's other terms, but basically it's somebody who has a little bit of difficulty getting some credit for a number of reasons. Sometimes it's just because they don't use credit cards and therefore they don't have a thick credit file. It can be as simple as that. They don't have to have bad credit or anything of that sort. So what you're trying to do though is enable somebody who may not be able to sell a house for full price, what they consider to be full price, to get their price, and somebody to buy that house who may not be able to buy a house to buy that house. So how do you do that? You bridge that gap by using terms in the middle. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit. It's you are acting a little bit like a broker, but you are a broker extraordinaire in that you are actually providing a lot of expertise with what you're doing. So how do I advance the slides here?
You're
ask
talking to the
Justin.
advancer here.
Ask Justin. Okay.
I'll try and
No,
go with your flow.
and by the way, that's the answer to many questions in life.
Ask Justin.
Go with the flow. Yes. Ask Justin. Right. Right.
Our Facebook group is going to be blowing up with a bunch of random questions now.
That's right. Here's the Ask Justin question of the day.
Yeah.
So let's say we have a little house like this. We're able to buy it from the seller. He says, look, we've approached him. I'd like to sell it. I'll sell it for $425,000. I really don't need any money right now. So I don't need a down payment. If I can get 3% interest on it and a 30-year deal and 10-year terms or a 10-year balloon, I'm great. So what we're trying to do is he is our seller. So then we turn around and like a lot of realtors would do, you want to sell the house. He is our seller, but we in turn want to sell the house to somebody. So we want to sell it for a purchase price that's above or equal to the price we're getting. Hopefully we're going to get a down payment that's more than we have to pay the seller. And we're going to get an interest rate that's more. And we're also going to get some balloon terms that at the end of them give us some income. And how might that you do that? Well, if you owe, say at the end of the term, why don't you go to the next slide, Justin?
Sure.
Whoops. I didn't, okay. Stop there, sorry.
Stop.
I thought I had one more slide in there. That's okay. A way you might do that is that if your buyer owes you, say, $170,000 at the balloon term, but you only owe $150,000 at the end of that term, then voila, you just made $20,000 at the end of the term. So it's a little bit like Larry and Marishka's lease option, where you're making a little bit of money up front, you're making some interest payments along the way, and then hopefully you're making some income on the exit. So this deal that we've brought up actually was done by a friend of ours named Scott, and he lives in Scottsdale. It's not named after him, but that's where he lives. He can buy this house from a seller for $425,000. Go ahead and move ahead, Justin. He wants $25,000, and next term, he wants a monthly payment of $1,500, and he also wants a 3% interest rate and a balloon of 10 years. Now, some of those numbers, the down payment and the monthly payment, are highlighted in blue for a reason, and those are because those are the stickler points that this guy really wants. You know, it's really important to him to get a down payment. He's got some need. Maybe he needs to pay off a medical bill, or he wants to buy a car, or send his kid to college, whatever. And he really wants some ongoing income of $1,500 a month. The rest is sort of loosey-goosey. You know, maybe he would accept a lower price. Maybe it's not quite a 10-year term on the balloon. Who knows? But when you do these deals, you really have to listen to what somebody's telling you, and craft your deal around that. I told Larry, Marishka, and Justin the other day when we were talking about that crafting these deals is a little bit like putting up a Christmas tree. You have the basic structure of a tree, and the terms that you're going to put on this deal are the ornaments. So you can make your down payment ornament either higher or lower, or in some place in the tree, or your interest rate higher or lower. You can move it all around, and you go, well, gee, it's sort of undefined as to where you put those ornaments. Yeah, but it's undefined on the Christmas tree, right? I mean, you can put it anywhere you want, and you might say, well, Sally wants the blue one over here, so that's where I'm going to put the blue one.
Right.
whatever it is, you have to craft it so that it fits within the parameters that you have. Two parameters that we have on this one is the down payment and the monthly payment. So
I think that's a really good point, Richard, that, and I think that's the challenge for a lot of folks when we start thinking about creative finance, is that there isn't just a formula. You can't just use the MAO formula that you would use on a flip. It's really wide open, and you can back into things and change this little ornament and replace it with this ornament, if you will, to use that Christmas tree analogy. And that's what makes it fun. But that's also, I think, what makes it really challenging for a lot of people, is it just like, well, where do I start? How do I do it? So
right.
I'm sorry, but I just wanted to kind of agree with you on that point.
Yeah, that's a great point. That makes it a little, it's like poking the bowl of jello. So where do you start? How do you start? So that's sort of why I wanted to point out the down payment and the monthly payment. So
yeah.
Next slide, Justin.
Yes, sir.
So as I said, you've always got a seller, and that seller to you is what you call your buy side. If you're the person in the middle, that's your buy side. And then you've got a sell side. So on your left hand, you've got somebody that says, he's going to sell it to me for $425, and he wants a down payment of $25. And that's going to make my loan amount back to him $400,000. And he said he wants $1,500 a month. So boom, I can give him that. What's next slide?
The term.
Okay, he said he wanted a term of 10 years, which is 120 months. And if I put it in my calculator and do my wizardry, I found out that I can't quite get him to 120 months and give him a $1,500 payment, because that's his hot button. But what I can do is I can give him an interest rate payment of 2.11%. So he's going to say, well, I don't quite like that. That's not what I bargained for. So a good thing to do is say, all right, let's do this. How about if I give you more than what you wanted, which is 3%, I'll give you 4% after that 2% period. Now that does several things. It makes the payment of $1,805, and we're going to do it for 15 years, which gives us another 84 months. One thing that does is, and a lot of people don't recognize this is a real, I don't want to call it a trick of the trade, but it's a key factor for any of us who are in this business. If you have a lower interest rate on a note or a mortgage, you're putting more of your payment towards your principal rather than your interest. So that accelerates your payments, actually makes your loan amount less. So guess what? Overall, you pay less interest. So in this case, you, the middleman, are paying less interest to the seller by having that 2.11% payment. Now that's evidenced by the fact that in over only 96 months, your loan amount, your unpaid principal balance, has dropped to $316,000. I mean, that's a huge drop comparatively to if you had a 9 or 10% interest rate, or even a 5 or 6.
Yes. Or run the calculator at 4% for 96 months and see what the UPB is with unpaid balance after 96 months. It's going to be a lot different. It's probably going to be a lot more than 316,000, right?
Exactly. So you're paying that 4%, and that's maybe more than you wanted to pay, but it's not really that impactful on the deal, because a lot of these deals pay off early, so you have less of a term. But even if you takes it to the full 15 years, takes the 84 months, your unpaid balance at that time, at that balloon time, is going to be $244,000 and some change. Now that's what you, the deal maker, owe your seller at that time. So let's go on to the buy side, which is on our right hand, we've been thinking about, well, gee, how do I balance all this the whole time? In this instance, Scott was only able to get $425 for it. He couldn't make any profit on the sale price. But guess what? He was able to get a down payment of $50,000. So Yahoo! If you put 2 and 2 together, you find out that Scott had to pay his seller $25, but he took in $50, So he's making $25,000 on the difference, okay?
Yeah.
Gives him a loan amount of $375, and he talks to his buyer and he says, you know, you can't quite qualify for a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac loan, so your interest rate's going to be a little bit higher, but you're going to get into this. And sort of as Marishka was saying earlier, you're kind of doing them a favor. They don't quite have this the muscle or the down payment to get into it, so you're letting them build credit and build equity, but you have to charge them a little bit for it.
Yep.
So the payment is $2,200 a month. Excuse me. So again, you're going to be making money on that, and you're going to do it for a 180-month term. So at the end of that 180 months, your loan amount's going to be, Justin, $266,000. Okay, so let's look at the summary of what our friend Scott got off of this deal in terms of the profits. He got $50,000 in from his purchaser. He had to pay $25,000 out, so he made $25,000 on the sale. On the interest payments ongoing, for the first 96 months, he made $748, which was the $2,200 minus the, I can't remember what the number was, $1,500 or whatever it was. And
So
for
made the spread between the two.
Right, the spread between the 2%, excuse me. And then for the remaining period, he makes $443 per month. Now, at the end of the balloon, next slide, exit income. Sorry, I got to get a little bit of water here. His exit, he owes, or he gets in from his buyer, $266,000 and some change. He only owes $244. So guess what? He's making an extra $22,000.
Right.
So we have a deal here where, you know, if he were a broker, he'd probably only make 30,000 bucks off of it. You know, big deal. But he's made 25,000 up front. For 15 years, he's made anywhere from $400 to $700 a month. And he collects $22,000 out the backside. That's kind of a nice little return. Yep. If you could do 3 of these a year,
yep,
they add up.
And the thing that's really nice about this is, yes, you do a fair amount of work up front, but once you make that 25,000 up front, you're not really doing a whole lot for all that monthly income and for that balloon payment at the end.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That is passive.
And if you once you start to get into this, you can actually mix and match the maturities of your balloons. And I've got one going right now where I'm actually going to pay it off earlier, but I'm going to increase my spread by doing that. And you know, probably the seller who sold me it would probably not rather be paid off 5 years earlier than he wanted to, but that's kind of what the market is.
Yeah.
And it increases my profits significantly. So once you start to understand this stuff, that's where, as Marishka was saying, the creativity comes into it. And it's just a whole lot of fun. If you're just a little bit of a numbers geek like I am, you can just kind of get lost in this stuff. That's fun.
Yeah, Richard, that's an awesome
that is
architecting
really awesome
deal.
Yeah.
You get cash up front, you get cash every month, and you get cash at the end. I mean, that's 3 ways to make money, and you're always making money in this deal. When, like you said before, if you're just putting the transaction together like a real estate commission, you're just making the upfront money and that's it. So this is making money up front, making long-term money, and then making money when it's done. It's the trifecta. There we go.
Yeah. And what was your risk in the deal?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Nothing.
Yeah, right.
Now, in all honesty, you have to write your docs correctly so that you're not monkey in the middle. If you don't do it correctly, then you're carrying a liability back to your seller. And if your buyer defaults on you, you're left holding the bag.
True.
But if you write your loan documents correctly, it's a direct pass-through and you have no risk whatsoever. That's a very good question, Marishka.
Does anybody have any questions about any of these deals that were thrown up on the board today? Go ahead and chime in now. We can answer those. We are here to help.
Ricky says he sees it all the time. What are we seeing?
Oh, this was back about
behind.
borrowers
before I see.
Oh.
Gotcha,
Yeah.
gotcha. Yeah,
falling out of escrow for,
Yeah.
the
Okay.
lenders checking.
All right.
You know, so much of this, I think too, is basically, it's like you need to kind of understand these sort of deals to be able to present them to both the seller and to your buyer as well too. You know, it's just a matter of making sure that you've got everything so it's easily to figure out and you know, present to. But
Yeah,
you know,
and I'll say too that if a lot of you are lost on this, don't feel badly. It kind of takes a while to absorb it. I pretty quickly I'm going to have, probably the next couple of weeks, I'm going to have a bunch of examples of this up on my website. And Justin can certainly help you structure deals, but if you want to just learn a little bit more about it, you can email me. You can call me at that number, but you can also just drop me an email, and when I get it together, I'll give you a link and tell you where the spreadsheet is, and you guys can just sit there and look at it. It helps to follow numbers on a spreadsheet sometimes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we all learn differently, right? And so sometimes it's hard to, listen to someone talk and you're like, oh, I don't really quite understand all the numbers, but when you actually can see the spreadsheet, it might make it a little more real. But again, just hearing things over and over again, you start to pick things up over time. And, that's one reason why the four of us, we all continue our education. We continue to network with, people who are in the note space. We go to these different conventions because you have to, constantly be talking and listening with folks who are doing different types of business and deals, and you do pick it up over time. But it isn't always readily apparent.
I just go for the drinks.
I would even suggest we throw the replay back out there as for when you rewatch this show, is to write down the numbers and then work them yourself.
Work them yourself.
Put them in Excel, work them yourself, understand the differences when you change one thing, how it changes the three others. Just like in a math equation or calculus, you got three variables to solve to the fourth one, right?
Right.
So that's how you solve.
Are you talking math, Justin? You're scaring me here.
Sorry. Where's that Richard slide where we go back with all the math on the chalkboard?
Larry, would you mind sharing your story of your math phobia?
Oh my goodness.
So I grew up in a small town in Montana, and my mother was a 5th and 6th grade math teacher. So guess who I had for 5th and 6th grade math?
Your mom.
My mom. And I hated math. I really hated it with a passion because I was kind of getting to the point of being bullied. It's like, oh, your mom's just going to give you an A regardless. You don't have to do the work and everything else. So I just said, I'm not going to do the work. Screw this. I'm just not going to do it. That carried with me all the way through high school and college, and basically it's like up until very recently. Even though we've got all kinds of spreadsheets and online calculators that we can use in our business, and we do, and it makes it pretty simple. And also when you're married to a bright woman like Marishka, I kind of let her do a lot of the calculations and everything else. Well, about a year ago, I decided, to heck with this. I'm going to learn how to use the financial calculator. And I sat down in one of my recliners and with the program and my calculator, and spent like 3 hours a day for about 2 weeks, and I learned how to do it. And let me tell you, it really just gave me a new appreciation for all the numbers that we previously could see on the spreadsheets. I could really grasp my hands around it now. I could really feel it, and it was very powerful for me. So it's like you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
You can teach a not so old dog new tricks, right?
Yeah.
So Jim has asked us a question here.
Okay.
He said, how is it that we can eliminate the middleman risk? Whose responsibility would it be to direct the default handling, foreclosure process, if the buyer stops paying?
Good question.
You would end up, chime in here, you guys, but in my instance, I would handle it. I wouldn't be financially responsible for any of it, but I would certainly do that as a accommodation, or just for my investor assistance. When I sell partials or anything, I'm not on the financial hook, but I know they don't really have the means to go out and to know the lawyers to call and things like that, where it's pretty easy for us to do that.
Right.
So I would always help out my investors on something like that.
Yeah, and I think the rule of thumb too, if you're in an architect deal like Richard was showing on the screen, is you need to hold back a couple of months payments anyways, just if something happens.
Just have some reserves.
That's just a rule of
Right.
thumb. I mean, with that $25,000 that you got down, I mean, you have money there just as a cushion for a few months, because at least that's what I do with ours that we do that way. So.
Yeah, a few dollars in the bank
Yep.
for this type of thing is
Yep.
great. I know when I was flipping houses, I always had the profits from at least one deal in the bank,
Yep.
so that if the market turned on me, I could pay down my hard money lender and
Yep.
didn't have to sweat bullets while we were trying to, see if the market was going to turn up or not.
Smart man.
So we'll write down Richard's number there, 800. Is this a vanity number or just 508-5212?
Yeah, no, that's just my 800 number I got.
It's American 1-800 American Note Capital.
Yeah.
Richard at amnotecap.com. So there you go.
That's
There's
actually that's a GoDaddy number. It works pretty well.
GoDaddy.
Mhm.
Go Richard.
Go Richard, go Daddy. Go Daddy, go.
So we're still going to hang on here for a little bit and answer your questions. Thanks, Jim, for that last question that you brought and every other question that was on the call today. But our next note meetup is Wednesday, July 8th from 6 to 8 p.m. again. We should be at a live facility, and I'm also going to record this via Zoom again as well. So we'll have a live audience and we'll have the ability to do this on Zoom as well. So I'll record that so we can stream that. That'll be my new technology for this year. So I hope it all works out very well. But you can follow Bright Path Notes on any of our social media channels, Bright Path Notes Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and there's my email, Justin at brightpathnotes.com. And since we're all on the call today, please join our Facebook group. Just search in the Facebook group search box, Be the Bank Real Estate Note Investing, and you'll see this logo in the background, the Be the Bank logo. That's how you know you got the right group. Go ahead and ask to join, answer a few questions for us so we know that you're legit. And we are here to help you out with any deals you have. I'm pretty sure you're going to have some opportunities to do seller financing. And this is why I've been preaching seller financing for the past couple of months on the meetup. That's why we talked about it last month. And that's why we hit it so heavy this month as well, because it's just going to get more and more in front of you and have these opportunities. So now that you've seen some case studies, you're going to be like, oh, well, that deal I saw a couple of days ago, I could have done something like that. And then it's just going to get your wheels turning on how to be more creative. You're going to have to get involved and you're going to be active. This isn't something you can just sit on the sidelines and for things to happen. Like Marishka said, you get involved in it early and you start creating this opportunity for you. Then all of a sudden it's a money mint for you. It's just making money for you month after month. And then as Richard showed, you have an exit at the end where you can make money as well. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording for today, but the rest of you feel free to hang on and we can be a little more candid, if you will. So thanks for tuning in for this this month's Be the Bank Note Meetup, and I will figure out how to stop recording in just a second.
Thanks for having us on.
Thanks.
Yeah, you guys hang on. Everyone else can hang on too. I just got to figure out how to stop recording. Oh, there we go. All right. Until next time, everybody. See ya.